The circumstantial evidence suggests Columbus was likely a member of the Knights of Christ. I'm not saying he was, but I'm saying the evidence suggests he was. The Larson papers contain a secret runic alphabet linked to an 1880s Swedish Masonic Tailors Guild. The X symbol for A was found being used as an alphabetical code. You saw that yesterday, circa 1450. And I want you to look at these dates. Other than the Larson papers, they're all around a similar time period. These are facts. The Cistercians founded the Knights Templar in 1128. The Templars used codes extensively for financial transactions. The Templars had the finest sailing fleet in the world by 1300. Nobody argues with this point, at least not that I'm aware of. The Knights Templar were put down in 1307, and 80 to 90% of the Templar order, along with their ships, disappeared into history. And I've had a lot of historians I've talked to said, they were done after that. Well, logic tells me that if you've got 90 to 80% of your group that's out there somewhere, they don't just die off and disappear. I don't believe that. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to veer from the facts and we're going to start doing some speculation. And once again, it's going to be based on sound historical facts. I'm going to tell you what my interpretations are of the data that I presented and other data. All 5 runestones with the hooked X and Columbus's sigla are medieval. Those happen to be facts, I think, but the Narragansett is speculation on my part. The hooked X symbol appears to be an alphabetical code secretly used by the medieval Cistercians and Knights Templar. That's what I think it is. The 1885 Masonic Guild documents appear to link the hooked X to Freemasonry. And the hooked X likely represents important ideological symbolism. Why? The reason is because it's not found in the record, the runic record. So what is it? Logic told me if these stones are real, then there has to be an explanation for it, right? And if it's not in the record, then maybe there's something else. And this is where I had to switch over to the other side of my brain. And I have to tell you, I struggled with it. But I've had some people who helped me. And when I started talking about the hooked X in my lectures, people started to wait until I was finished and everybody left, and they approached me. They were Freemasons. And they said, I remember the first one, and he came up to me and I said, "Are you a Freemason?" He said, "Yes." I go, "How did I do?" He goes, "Pretty good." And I said, "Boy, oh boy, I'm really fumbling in the dark." And he said, maybe we can give you some help. And they did. Well, there was one other thing that I didn't get a chance to tell you yesterday on purpose about the Cistercians. And this is based largely on what I'm about to tell you now on Alan Butler's work. He was the guy who was standing at Rievaulx Abbey with the ruins behind him. This guy is one brave guy. And I was quietly thinking this with my wife by myself about this story I'm about to tell you. And then when I read one of Alan's books, I felt like I had found a brother. And I sent his website an email and I complimented him on his work. And I said, "Oh, by the way, I'm working with these rocks over here." The next day, I received 2 long emails, and he and I have been going back ever since. And basically what his thesis is, and what I was speculating on, but he's hit it out of the park, is that the Cistercian order, who became wildly successful, and the Templar order back getting into the beginning of the 14th century, who had a fascination for the Virgin Mary, were not fascinated with her because of what the church thought. They had a little different spin on it. I think, and Alan thinks, that they were using the Virgin as a metaphor for their true faith, which was what I call goddess ideology. And if you go back and you look at the records, there's some interesting things that happen. One of St. Bernard's disciples, Pope Innocent II, when he became Pope, I think it was in 1134, he gave a speech that essentially, this is what he argued. He basically said, hey, if Jesus is the Son of God, and of course this is the age-old battle in religion, what is their relative relationship? Aren't they, kind of equal? Well, maybe, maybe not. Well, if Jesus is way up here and the Virgin is his mother, aren't they equal? And this became known in church circles as the Great Heresy. And I haven't read as much as I'm going to about this, but this is a fact that I find very interesting and I think lends support. And I want you to take a close look at this image, because I'm about to tell you what I think the hooked X means. But I want you to notice that the Virgin, or the goddess in this case, I believe, is providing protection equally to both the monks and the nuns, right? Equally. Remember that image and look at her face. This is the most popular image of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, by 2-to-1 in the manuscripts, in the carvings, is Bernard drinking the milk of the Virgin Mary with Jesus on his lap. And I find this very interesting. I don't know how it went over, but this is apparently a vision that became mythology associated with him, and he became a saint. But I just see something going on here. This is the Virgin, or the Mother Goddess, nurturing him. And of course, as you know, every abbey and all these cathedrals that they were involved in building are all named after her. And this is where we start to get into this symbolism, and I was trying to understand what it was all about. And I've been educated that when the structures that they built, the nave of the church where people come into worship, represents the womb of the sacred feminine, or the goddess. And when you come into church, you're being nurtured in the womb of the goddess. And then you go out into the world. And that ratio is consistent with what they call the sacred ratio, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. There's other ratios here, and I'm sure the mathematics people understand that. But in this case, we're talking about a 2-to-1 ratio. You can see the vesicus piscis there. Do you see those intersecting lines that forms the vertical almond shape? Oftentimes, religious figures are seen within this shape, and that's that 2-to-1 ratio. And of course, you know that's created by intersecting two circles. Some people call that man and woman, heaven and earth, however you want to define it. But that ratio is apparently very important to the Cistercians. I find it interesting that the Kensington Runestone, whoever cut it down to roughly a 2-to-1 ratio. Was this because this ratio was sacred? I'll let you decide. I know what I think. And remember, being nurtured in the womb of the great goddess, and after the service is over and you go back out and are allegorically born back out into the world, how does that happen with a female? You go through the allegorical birth canal, right? That's what that almond-shaped vesicus piscis is. In Christianity, they call it Christ's ascension to heaven. That's what that symbol represents. To the goddess people, it represents being allegorically born through the birth canal of the goddess. So I guess it just depends on your viewpoint, how you interpret this symbolism. But I don't think there's any ambiguity about those doorways. Those are designed after the female genitalia. And this isn't about sex. This is beautiful. This is about birth, and this is all about allegories. And this is the one I just love. When you go into church, this is the womb of the great goddess. And that rose window represents the goddess, Mary Magdalene, the dove. And when the sun, which is considered a male deity, rises in the eastern sky, and the rays of the sun come in, you have the allegorical union of male and female. So in going through this and trying to get my mind properly orientated with this symbolism and these allegories, I went to the Masons, or actually they came to me, and they invited me to speak at their lodge, Grand Lodge in St. Paul, Minnesota on April 25th. And I took them through all this stuff. And then I got to the symbolism, and I said, hey, as I understand it, this is what this part of the symbol means. And again, the A symbol, the X is being used for A, and that's the symbol, the runic symbol, that the scholars expected. Well, we certainly don't have that.